Despite Australia's aggressive rate hike campaign, tomorrow's unemployment rate is forecast to stay flat at 3.6%, close to 50-year lows. But as we've told you, the incoming governor of the Reserve Bank, Michelle Bullock, thinks the natural rate of full employment here is around 4.5%, and that suggests interest rates will keep rising. It also brings into focus the legacy of outgoing Governor Philip Lowe. I caught up with Michael Blythe, independent economist at Pinpoint Macro Analytics and former chief economist at the Commonwealth Bank, just a short time ago.
Yes, it's been a remarkable part of the story, really. Despite all those rate rises we've had, the labour market's held together remarkably well, and most of the leading indicators for the labour market still look very solid as well. So it's a remarkable outcome, really, if that's the way the numbers play out on Thursday.
And of course, there's the to and fro between where is the natural rate of full employment in Australia. This moves about as we recognise, but what's your own sense as to where it might sit at the moment?
Well, this number, this natural rate of unemployment, full employment, it's a number economists like to talk about, but nobody can actually measure. You kind of know in 10 years' time when you look back and you can see where the unemployment rate was over time and where inflation was over time. But it's largely guesswork when you're trying to talk about the here and now. The reality is, though, we've had low unemployment for quite a while now, and if you go back 2 years, the big worry then wasn't inflation, it was the fact that inflation was too low. It was below the Reserve Bank's 2 to 3% target range. So I think it leaves a bit of a question mark over whether those 4 to 5% type numbers that people normally equate with full employment is in fact too high an estimate.
OK, so what you've done is some analysis going back over the 8 Reserve Bank governors that we've had to date, including Philip Lowe, and tried to cast their legacy in regards to where the cash rate went to, where the inflation rate went to, where the unemployment rate went to. How do you think he'll stack up as history judges him?
Well, I think unfortunately the focus is going to be on the end point for inflation, the end point for interest rates at the end of his term. And from that perspective, he doesn't actually look too good compared with his recent predecessors who were kind of in that modern monetary policy framework, if you like. But you've got to judge him by more than that. It's got to be about consistency. And if we look at the price level and how that evolved over his 7-year term, he sits there up with the best, really. Certainly matches the record of Glenn Stevens, Ian Macfarlane, and of course the legendary Nugget Coombs as well, the very first Reserve Bank governor. And he also looks pretty good if we move to the other objective that the Reserve Bank has, which is, of course, that full employment that we've been talking about. And he's certainly got a very impressive track record when you look at it from that full employment perspective. So I think overall history should really treat him kindly. You can't just judge a 7-year term by that final number at the end of those 7 years.
So one other aspect of this, I kind of guess, is your Reserve Bank governor, you really need them to be at the wheel when there's a crisis on, not necessarily when things are going smoothly. During a term of, say, Glenn Stevens, not too much was really going on economically. There wasn't much inflation. Interest rates stayed on hold for a very long period of time. But under Glenn Stevens' watch, of course, you've had the pandemic. You've had quite clearly a war in Ukraine, which has changed, if you like, the economics of the world. And so really he had a crisis to confront that maybe other previous governors didn't have such significant crises.
Yes, well, and timing is everything. Sometimes you get a long period like that where everything runs smoothly, but most Reserve Bank governors have actually faced some kind of crisis during their term. So Phil Lowe, clearly, the pandemic and the rest was probably the biggest test that any central bank governor has had over time. Glenn Stevens, I guess, did have to deal with the GFC when you think about early in his term. The other governors have faced inflation shocks like the first oil price shock back in the 1970s, the stagflation, high inflation, high unemployment that we had during the 70s and for a large part of the 80s as well. So it's a tough job being a central bank governor, and it's much more comfortable sitting on the sidelines and commentating, I think, on how they've gone, and rather than sitting in that desk up there in the Reserve Bank building in Martin Place.